You're listening to The Tiger and the Viper. When your parents talk about making you, usually they're being figurative. They meet, they fall in love, they come together physically, and the alchemy of the human species usually takes care of the rest. They usually don't mean that they designed you. But when I was made, I was made. I suppose that's not something a lot of people can say, even today. When my mom and dad were ready to have a baby, her screening notified the doctor that she had a strong likelihood of having a child with osteogenesis imperfecta, or brittle bone disease. It was unlikely that any of her children would live past 10, and they were, of course, rightfully devastated. They didn't come from much, my parents. Dad worked at a bakery, and my mom tailored from home. They just wanted a little piece of the crazy, chaotic world that felt like their own. And they loved each other so much that not being able to impress that love onto the world with a baby, it seemed wrong. That's why it seemed right, I guess, when they listened to a family friend and met with a music producer in a nauseatingly tall office building downtown. A 25-year contract wasn't really that long if you thought about how much time it took to train and craft the perfect entertainer, the man told my mother and father, sliding over the paperwork. The baby would be born healthy, they said, and what's more, if they worked hard, they would be the face of every major Pepsi campaign, their name plastered across households from limited edition coffee flavors to sneakers. If you could somehow cut an untieable knot out of a genetic problem and replace it with whatever you wanted, what parent wouldn't want to play God? You can design your child, the producer said, pointing a manicured finger to a set of what looked like paint swatches on the display. Their sex, their height, heck, the shade of their eyes. You raise them, we put them to work. The label takes care of everything else. A year later, doctors snipped into a fertilized embryo. CRISPR-Cas9 sliced into the lattice of DNA at the very point where they believed this gene lived that caused OI. They cut it right out and inserted something else in its place, or so I'm told it went. 9 anxious months later, I was born. I think my parents realized right away that things had gone wrong. I mean, how could they miss the shock white hair? My mom used to say that as a baby, my hair looked like lines of fishing wire plastered to my head. I suppose it's poetic to say I was born old. Weirder still was that they realized I lit up like a Christmas bulb when they came back to my bassinet in the hospital that night. The gene editing, doctors explained to my mother and father, was still an unpredictable process in many ways. You could target a certain gene with a relative precision, but cutting it came with complications, none of which, of course, the music label had warned my parents about. As you do, I guess. They could, of course, locate the offending gene that would kill me with brittle bone disease and delete it with ease from my RNA. Once the snip happened, the alchemy of the human species would take over again, this time in the form of a cell rushing in to repair the gap. But sometimes, the process goes wrong. One of my doctors later said that sometimes a cell can't quite fix the trauma of the cut. Sometimes it deletes entire chunks of chromosome trying to stitch itself back together, shunting entire pieces of useful genetic information into the void. Other times, the change meant for one specific gene gets copied and tiled across the DNA, like a mosaic that no one asked for or expected. They usually don't tell people that part a lot of the time, I'm sure. You know, what's interesting though, I don't get to talk about it much with the NDA and all. I was manufactured twice in my lifetime, which I suppose is twice more than most people. The first was, of course, how I was born. You know all that now. But the second time was when they were ready to debut me to public. As a performer, I mean. If I'm being honest, I never really liked the name Sunny Joon. It always seemed to me like some clueless marketing department's attempt at bringing attention to how I was raised. Like I was some flavor of American doll or something. Sunny is a made-up name, easy to pronounce, a runny egg with a cheerful yolk. And Joon is a boy's first name. A nonsense name altogether, if you ask me. But most people don't really ask me, which always surprised me. Weird how people can sort of just accept a thing and never really question it. But I was born Choi Min-jae to Choi Myung-yi and Ji-hoo, who wanted me in this world so badly that they were willing to change the very building blocks of life to make it happen. That's why everything that happened afterwards makes it so sad.